Nova Scotia's EMO asked to use the hall as a registration centre for residents of Portapique who had fled their homes.
For residents of Portapique who had fled their homes.
An RCMP officer was posted here in a cruiser. By this time, police were on the hunt for the shooter, who they knew was impersonating a police officer. At 10:30 a.m., 2 RCMP officers fired multiple shots outside the hall. Sources have told CTV News the officers thought they were firing at the suspect when it was in fact a fellow Mountie.
This program is brought to you in part by...
Why don't you get yourself some turned-down collars, Poirot? They're much more the thing, you know.
The thing, Hastings? Do you think Poirot concerns himself with mere thingness?
No, I see that.
The turned-down collar is the first symptom of decay of the grey cells.
You know, I just think if people keep pushing, I can't, first of all, thank enough all of the hard work. There's 3 fellow YouTubers who are working very, very hard with me on this one. Rage in the Cage, Steve LTT, and just my stupid opinion. Just plugging them, sorry. But they are fantastic guys, really been busting their humps here. And, you know, stepping up to the plate, because there's a certain amount of risk saying certain things. And also, likewise, all of the people who are volunteering information and time, which is, like I said, over on the Discord or sending me anonymously information, it is fantastic.
Morning. Okay. Now I have a limited time frame here. Hopefully I can get this done before I gotta go, because I got half hour. I have to leave. Hope everybody's doing well this morning. Paul's got a new article. Please click the link down below. I believe this is behind a paywall. I don't want to get in trouble with Frank. I fear I'm going to here soon. But click the link down below. Subscribe. Support Frank Magazine. Support Paul. I love promoting other people. Anyway, but got to support, right? So let's get into the article right away. Morning, Todd, Mark, Christina, Sis, Nick Lou. How's it going? Shalom. There were no police around. What didn't happen in Portapique by Paul Belango. Around the time the first Mounties arrived in Portapique Beach, the night of April 18th, 5 of the 13 victims were still alive or in the process of being killed, according to reconstruction events by Frank, supported by evidence of key witnesses and a family member of one of the victims. Yes, okay. According to the RCMP's own recent admissions and statements to surviving members, the RCMP was reportedly on scene at 10:26 April 18th, and Workman did not leave the area until 10:45, giving almost 20 minutes of continue his spree. I debate that one. He was seen moving through a field in his police replica with the lights off by a group of riders on ATVs who had come to investigate the fires. Not sure how that's quite possible, being that the first time they gave doesn't work. Anyway, moving along, there is a further evidence that the RCMP did not protect or preserve crime scenes throughout the night, left bodies uncovered, evacuated only a handful of residents, and did not call in enough reinforcements and investigators to deal with the 9 different crime scenes. In the 8 months since Gabriel Wortman went on a rampage and began killing some of his neighbors that Saturday night, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the Crown, and governments have been extraordinarily vague about what took place. A public inquiry has been announced. How long did that take? But there is no set date of when it will begin to conduct hearings. Apparently it's underway. Hey, Paul, how's it going? There has been at least 3 shifting accounts about when the first 911 call came. The force eventually settled on 10:01 as the first call. although redacted documents state that the neighbor Alan Griffin called around 9:15. Yes, this was a problem in there. Noticing a fire, Wortman's residence, 200 Portapique Beach Road. There has been no explanation given about the differences in times. Of course, that's normal. The RCMP originally had different times of arrival. The first police officers eventually settling on 10:26. It has never been formally identified which officer or officers were there. Thank goodness. I believe in this article. I have not read it yet. I'm reading it as always. First time with you. I think the officers finally, which is good. Then I'll start talking about them. Are identified. Which detachments they came from and what they did or did not do. It has never been released the names of the officer in charge of the incident or the role played by the highest ranking officers in the force. Sources say the members of the RCMP's emergency response team, ERT, did not arrive at the scene until shortly before midnight, 2 hours before after the first 911 call. The RCMP and the Crown have refused to release call logs, radio transmissions, and any other conclusive evidence about who and what and when. The RCMP and Crown have also declined to put out a timeline which might show the order in which Wortman's victims were killed, the documents which were used to provide evidence for search warrants, which by law should be readily available to the public, of course, because that's your property, have been and continue to be heavily redacted, white pages now, so it has been difficult to verify what actually happened. Some information, once redacted, were blacked out once new information was released. This was unbelievable how they would redact previously released information, but we've been through that before. The official narrative has been versions of a story which Wortman and his longtime girlfriend, common law wife, Lisa Banfield, had a fight and that Wortman tied her up and or handcuffed her. Wortman is said to have gone on a shooting spree where he killed 13 of his neighbors in about a 35 to 40-minute span. The continued narrative has also shifted over time. The unredacted information, for example, makes no mention of the girlfriend being restrained, but in fact places her at the scene at the time Wortman is setting the fire to his log cabin and cottage, 200 Portapique and 136 warehouse, Orchard Beach. One can travel between the two properties via narrow path in the woods. There is no other road connection linking them other than just driving around the loop. For Wortman to go by road from one door to the other door is little more than a kilometer in distance. It appears the official narrative, such as it is, Wortman burned his buildings first, then began killing. It is not clear the sequence of events when the girlfriend purportedly escaped from Wortman or from which location. This is altered also with time. Pioneer, Grinder, how's it going? Lisa, Dawn, Point Fire. Nighttime podcast. Very excited to see you here. Okay, continuing on. Alan Griffin lives at 4 Ferris Lane, a rutty dead-end road that ends a couple hundred meters parallel to the water east of Portapique Beach Road. It lays south of Wortman's cottage in a tiny indent on the shoreline. There is a direct view from Griffin's house to Wortman's house, prominent dock jutting from the bank, which has now been destroyed. Please refer to the last video. Griffin, was it the last video? I haven't put up another video. Sorry, yes, it is the last video. Griffin told the RCMP investigators in partially unredacted documents that he and his wife first noticed Wortman's house burning around 2100 hours, 9 p.m. Excuse me. This is much earlier than previously reported. The police say the first reports of gunshots did not come until 10:05. Alan Griffin's son, Peter, a friend of Wortman's, also reported hearing the sound of fire in Wortman's warehouse burning around the same time. Both Griffins said that they called the fires to 911. Neighbors told Frank that they believe The first to be killed before or after the fire was started at Wortman's home. The nearest neighbors to the south, John Zoll and Elizabeth Jo Thomas. Their A-frame cottage was located across the road from the Griffins' property at 287 Portapique Road, a 20-acre vacant tract of land owned by Wortman. According to the scenario, Zoll and Thomas were shot in their house set on fire sometime before 10. Okay, sorry, thinking aloud here. Don't mind me. Roxy. Because the house was burned to the ground, initial suspicions were that Wortman either used a lot of gasoline or incendiary device. If one is to attempt the RCMP timeline, the Zoll fire appears to have started something small because it wasn't noticed by the Griffins fully engaged until around 11:30. Yes, sorry, that was my humming. Wortman would have then had to have drive around 1.5 kilometers up Portapique Beach Road down to Orchard Beach Beach Road, down to Orchard Beach to the property of his next victims. There is conjecture in the neighborhood about whether it was Greg and Jamie Blair, or elementary teacher Lisa McCauley, who told others that she had been had a fling with Wortman, and who told others that she had a fling. Okay, good. All right, so he is releasing. Okay. Had a fling with Wortman in the past, lived in a house that Wortman uncle had built, financed by Wortman. The distinctive raised bungalow, about 2,500 square feet of living space, is among the largest in the neighborhood. He believed it rightfully should have been his, but lost in a battle in court to his uncle, who sold it to Macaulay for $189,000, high for the area. Property 135 Orchard Beach Road, which sat on a 1.5-acre lot directly across the entrance from Wortman's warehouse man den. Interesting. 136 Orchard Beach. The warehouse, which featured an apartment, sat on a 3,200 square foot concrete pad. Either the burning of the building across the road or the gunshots from the murder of her next door neighbors, Greg and Jamie Blair, attracted Macaulay's attention. When she went outside, her children, aged 10 and 12, had gone to bed. Her body was found on her front lawn near the rail fence in the middle of the yard, not far from the road. I like these details coming out. Most of these I know, right? But I will occasionally pause where there's probably something to look at. The body is a curious onlooker. Corey Ellison was found lying in a ditch across the road, a few steps from the steel grates driveway at Wortman's warehouse. Ellison walked about 400 meters up the road, father's cottage, to investigate the source of the glow from the sky from the burning warehouse. Before he was killed, Ellison told his brother Clinton on the phone that he was taking photographs of the fire. When Clinton went looking for him, found him dead, he retreated south, likely several hundred meters, before turning into a laneway he hid nearby underbrush. He said he saw a flashlight sweeping an area behind him and assumed Wortman was stalking him. Ellison had a cell phone with him and called his father, telling him to call 911. Ellison did not call 911 himself and said he hid in the woods in freezing temperatures for about 4 hours, suffered mild hypothermia. It is not known whether Wortman took the time to actually stalk Ellison in the midst of his spree or was using laser sights on his weapon to sweep the area. Whatever the case, he appeared to be intent on eliminating any witnesses to his deeds. Wortman likely then made his way north to the house of Greg and Jamie Blair next to Macaulay's. Their neat red and white cottage sits largely hidden from the road by undergrowth. The house faces south towards the water and not the road. On the way up the driveway, there is a tiny shed. On the door is a sign that reads, "Warning, this property is protected by a double-barrel shotgun 3 nights a week." You guess which ones. Lots of guns. I want to attack homes with guns. Greg Blair, who ran successful business in nearby Truro, is believed to have responded to the police car in his yard. He recently had a dispute with Wortman, for sources say. Wortman shot him outside. As he came forward to the house, he passed a large welcome sign to the right. Wortman went after Greg's wife, Jamie. Seeing the danger, she shuffled her 2 sons, also aged 10 and 12, into a bedroom where they either hid in the closet or behind a bed. She may have dialed 911 or was in the process of doing so. Her back was against the bedroom door. Wortman shot through the door 8 times, killing her and narrowly missing her children. He then, pulling the burning logs out of the fireplace, placed them in the middle of the room, and according to the same sources, the Blair house filled with smoke. The children managed to pull the logs back into the fireplace, then ran next door to Macaulay's house, where her nearby children were in bed. I think they also shut off the stove. They roused them, and all 4 of them went into the basement, called 911. The Macaulay house has near wraparound windows in the basement, making it tricky to find shelter. The time was around 10:05, although police have not confirmed this. Wortman then traveled north a few hundred meters, where he killed Frank Letchen and in the kitchen of his house, and his wife, Dawn Madsen, in the living room, according to Dawn's son, Ryan Farrington. He made a very nice, good statement on TV a couple times here. Wortman set fire in the kitchen and then went back outside, sat in the police car, and was back in the driveway. Police did not give chase. Andrew McDonald, who operates Maritime Auto Parts, an auto recycler in nearby Glenholm. He has neatly pointed cottage right at the junction of Portapique Beach and Orchard Beach roads. McDonald's company is the sponsor of the police hockey team. Yes. Oh, it's the pieces coming together. Of the police hockey team and nearby seniors league. He knows local Mounties and they know him. McDonald has refused to be interviewed and has hung up on the phone when called by a number of reporters, but glimpses of his story have been told in the earliest days of the after the shooting. In the unredacted documents recently supplied to the public and conversations he has had with others. McDonald and his wife Kage got into one of his vehicles and went to investigate the source of all the smoke and obvious fire. They drove past small blue-gray cottage, lovingly built 10 years ago and fastidiously decorated by Letchen and Madsen. McDonald saw a police car sitting in the driveway. There was a flicker of flame behind the French doors. Where the kitchen was located, there was no way that they could have known that Letchen and Madsen were already dead. Wortman again started a small fire. There is speculation that the fire was intended to lure another neighbor and his wife out of the property across the road and into his laser gun sight. The neighbor did not bite. McDonald drove down Orchard Beach for a little bit. The warehouse was on fire to his right. He apparently didn't notice the bodies of Macaulay or Allison. There was no street lighting. It was pitch dark. New moon. Headlights on a gravel road. I don't know how many of you drive in gravel roads with pitch black. He turned his vehicle around, headed up the road. Wortman pulled out of the driveway and headed south towards him. They met door to door. Wortman, dressed as a Mountie, raised his gun, and he sported his red laser line, which McDonald can see was painting his forehead. He ducked. Wortman fired. A bullet grazed his head. A second shot unknowingly lodged in his parka and missed him. He and his wife appeared to be the only eyewitness to get away. McDonald hit the gas, headed north, past his house towards Highway 2. Would have taken him a minute or less. Wortman was pointed south towards the water. As McDonald approached Highway 2, the first Mountie arrived on scene. This is crucial about the timing. It was Constable Stuart Basalt, a hockey player on the team McDonald's company sponsored. They apparently knew each other. McDonald told him what happened, and they pulled over. As second RCMP constable arrived, his name was Jordan Carroll, which has been reported earlier. Carroll's father, Al, a staff sergeant, was the commander that night at the Bible Hill Detachment, about a 30-minute drive from the other side of Truro. According to the unredacted documents, McDonald told the officers that Wortman or someone who looked a lot like him was dressed as a Mountie in RCMP marked cruiser and had shot him. The new warrant's very interesting as to that. At 10:36, 5 more Mounties were dispatched to the scene. One of the victim's family members subsequently was told, based on unredacted documents and police sources, the 4 were Corporal Natasha Jameson, Constable Chris Grund, Sergeant Dave Lilly, and Staff Sergeant Steve Halliday. It is not known whether who the 7th officer might have been, or whether the officer responded to the call. RCMP Superintendent Darren Campbell told the RCMP reporter that 4 officers were initially dispatched. At other times, the RCMP indicated that there were 6 on the scene within the first few hours. McDonald told them who had done the shooting, that he was driving, and where he was headed, toward the bottom of the road. The police did not give chase. They remained huddled near the end of the highway, likely waiting for emergency response units, which they had to know would take hours, and did, being that its members were spread out across the province. The first ERT units arrived around midnight. Meanwhile, the Blair and Macaulay children, who had been in the line of fire, had been on the line with 911 for almost half an hour by this time. Responding firefighters and paramedics were held back from the scene, as were the police themselves. According to the Halifax Examiner, in July, a police supervisor warned that some of the officers who were eager to charge down the road to hold their positions. Quote, "If you go down there, this will be your last shift in the RCMP." End quote. The supervisor said. Previously stated. The Mounties stayed put until around midnight. Children were on the phone for 2 hours. Actually, I believe it's more than that. With 911 operator, which reported Macaulay's obituary notice and later in McLean's. The police at the scene would have known where the children were. The shooter's location was not known, and the children were in danger. The RCMP say that at some point officers went down Orchard Beach Road and saw 2 bodies at one residence, another on the lawn next door. This would have been the Blairs and Macaulay. RCMP never said that when this took place, the officers, which officers were involved. The combination of events suggests the RCMP knew the children were in the basement. Talked about this lots. but did not attempt to rescue them. The RCMP issued statements stating the 6 officers were hidden in the woods and were protecting the house and the children. Not true. Very good. At around midnight, Sergeant Lilly, love that Globe Mail article he did, who is referred to as a constable in unredacted documents, Constable Grund, made a foray down Orchard Beach Road, extricated children, and took them to the nearby hospital in Truro. Those of you who don't know the Globe Mail article, please refer to it. Maybe somebody can drop the link in there. That would be good. He made a very good statement, very honest. Yes, we'll talk about him sometime here. Meanwhile, after the run with Andrew McDonald, after the run-in with Andrew McDonald, it would have taken Wortman a little more than a minute to get down to the bottom of the road where Kage Court intersects Orchard Beach Road. To the right stands 3 houses, respectively owned by Aaron Tuck, Peter, and Joy Bond, and a third person who was not there that night. Thank goodness. She was not there. Oh, sorry, that's smoke in my eye. Smoke in your eye. There was a clear altercation at the door. This is very important. Good. Wortman appears to have been moving very quickly now. He first killed Peter and Joy Bond, whose house faced the intersection of Orchard Beach. Joy had answered the door wearing her pajamas, and Peter had come out to see what the police officer wanted. By the way, I'm not clapping. I'm clapping because of the release, possibly, of this information, which is very important to the story. He then visited the ramshackle, blue, dilapidated house occupied by Aaron Tuck and his family. A discarded toilet sat by the front steps. A bathtub in the front yard was filled with empty liquor bottles, while the other bottles were strewn about the property. Yes, Aaron liked to drink. Tuck had bought several $1,000s worth of tools and equipment and was planning on renovating the property, according to Tammy Oliver McCurdy, sister of Tuck's wife, Jolene Oliver, and aunt of fiddle-playing Emily, their 17-year-old daughter. Oliver McCurdy is liaison person in her family with the RCMP. Quote, I was told that Aaron had just cracked open a beer and was found dead at the door. But even that version of the story was sugar-coated, as it were, by the Mounties. Oliver McCurdy finally received a copy of the medical examiner reports, the deaths, on November 26. The story it was told was much more descriptive and disturbing. This is why I was saying about the warrant is very important for Tara to have. The report states that Aaron was shot 3 times, Jolene twice, and Emily once. But Aaron and Jolene's injuries paint an even darker picture. Quote, Aaron had many blunt force lacerations and bruises to his palms and legs. Something not sharp was forced against him on his hands and legs, Oliver McCurdy said. He was a little guy, but he knew karate. He was MMA. He spent time. He knew how to fight. There was a clear altercation at the door. Sorry, I shouldn't interrupt her quotation here. There was a clear altercation at the door. He knew everything he had. He gave everything he had not to let him in the house. He would protect his girls to death. Do not understand how Wortman did it alone. Remember, an MMA fighter trying to protect his kids, who has done his time for fighting, was not a stranger to this, is not going to let some pissant 6'2" guy in his house. I strongly feel that there was more than one person there. End quote. Oliver McCurdy said that Jolene appeared to have been turning to run back into the house when she was shot through the arm. which entered her thorax. Second shot was on the right side of her head. To the side of her head. Emily was shot once in the living room. My apologies if this is too sensitive for some people, but it's important to have the details because it paints a picture, and it's much different than the RCMP tell. For Wortman, there is direct exit of the neighborhood across Orchard Beach Road at the eastern end of Catwood Court, which he took. Running north between the tree line behind the property's Orchard Beach Road is a massive blueberry patch of perfectly passable gravel road. According to residents, it had been regraded years ago, and any vehicle could easily have driven its kilometer course down to Brown Loop, a muddy, potholed semicircle passageway which has two openings onto Highway 2. Quote, everyone knows that's evacuation road if you want to get out of here in a fire or something, said Judy Myers, a bookkeeper who lives only 100 meters from the bonds and beyond the tucks. And the tucks. The three families were the only permanent residents in the area of the neighborhood. The RCMP had said an unnamed witness told them that a car believed to be driven by Wortman had been used to escape the scene around 10:35, but that wasn't true either. Of course. Right? Never would fit. You can't do this stuff. What video was that? Day one, I think. In fact, the vehicle was seen at the time, white vehicle driven by a curious neighbor who had seen the fires and had driven to investigate. How they can tell it's white cars in the middle of dark, I don't know. Quote, he went down Brown Loop, sat at the edge of the field. I know who this person is, and I know why he was there. He left around 10:35, a relative of the man said in the interview. Okay, yeah. And that car actually looks nothing like a cruiser, a Zero, that style of car. Wow, that's a bunch of misnomer bullshit. In fact, the RCMP now admits that Wortman didn't leave the area until around 10:45, which he drove with his with his lights out down Brown Loop towards the Bird. Okay, Wortman's vehicle was spotted on video passing gas station in Great Village 10:51, where he drove. Like to see this footage. Have not seen this, so he drove for about 32 minutes or so, pulling in behind the welding shop, a historic deep bunker next to the airport. He apparently spent the night there, discarding items in the field until 5:43 in the next morning. He left the area. On Saturday night, there were 13 people spread over 3 pods of killing at the end of Portapique Beach Road, near the top of Orchard Beach Road and Catwood Court. Although the RCMP knew that a number of people had been murdered and 4 structures were burning, it did not know everything and wasn't rushing to find out what it didn't know. After the children were rescued sometime around midnight and taken to the hospital in Truro, thank goodness, there was thank you to one particular member, Hero. There appears to have been only 4 regular Mounties left at the scene. There's actually 2 heroes. And the first ERT members. The RCMP would later say that there were, quote, 30 resources there without the times or details of the deployment, and emergency response teams and other Mounties were being called in from as far away as Woodstock, New Brunswick. So you know where Woodstock is. I've become intimately familiar now with geography down there. This is all rather interesting. Why are you calling people in from Woodstock? But they wouldn't get there for hours. Around 2 a.m., Clinton Ellison was rescued by ERT members from his hiding place in the woods and taken to hospital, treated for mild hypothermia. Around 4 a.m., the police seemed to be concentrated their entire effort, such as it was, on Portapique Beach Road, where Zoll and Thomas were murdered and Wortman's cottage burned down. Not on Orchard Beach Road, where 11 bodies lay, in 6 locations. No police were around. Enter Leon Jowdry. He is a forest technician from the Department of Natural Resources. He's lived in the area for 2 years since his marriage ended. A typical early riser is socialized until, until shortly before 9 p.m. the night before with the Blairs and another neighbor, having dinner in the garage to maintain social distancing and requirements. Nothing unusual was going on, he said. Dead tired, he went home, straight to bed. He awakened in the middle of the night to smell fire and smoke. It was 3:45. It didn't smell like forest fire, Jowdry said in the course of a series of interviews. I thought I should go to investigate. Jowdry's house is located at 140 Portapique Crescent, which is the loop that begins and ends at the side of Orchard Beach Road, between which is the part of the Blueberry Patch sits behind the Gletchen House on its own large lot. The only other permanent resident on the road that night. They were unharmed and were not evacuated. Jowdry said in an interview, they drove out to Orchard Beach Road, then up to the intersection of Portapique Beach Road. He turned left, drove past Andrew McDonald's house, then came to a parked RCMP armored vehicle near the smoldering ruins of Wortman's cottage. He had driven about 1 kilometer and seen no other police cars or officers. He pulled up on the armored car and tried to talk to the driver, who would or could not roll down his window. He got on the loudspeaker, told me to turn around and go back to the top of the road, quote. Jowdry said, quote, think about now, if the RCMP were looking for Wortman, they weren't exactly acting like that. The guy could have cared less about who I was. And if they were looking for him, why wasn't I evacuated? If these were crime scenes, why was I able to drive through them? What are the Mounties saying? What the Mounties are saying doesn't make doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense to me. What are they hiding? End quote. Jowdry said. Jowdry turns his pickup around and headed towards home. He passed Frank Gletchen's house, did not notice in the dark that it had burned to the ground. He raced to Orchard Beach Road at high speed. He said he didn't see anything, so he turned around his vehicle and headed back north towards the house. Along the route, he unknowingly passed the body of Corey Ellison, which was laying just south of the steel gates of Wortman's house and workshop at 136 Orchard Beach Road, which had also been set on fire. Like Wortman, Jowdry said that he had a brief fling with Lisa McCauley. Okay. Thank you. I don't know why, maybe I should just say certain things at times. Anyway. Moving along. She had told him about her relationship with Wortman. She had always spoken highly of Wortman, Jowdry said, which was the first clue that there might be something more afoot in their relationship than what appears to at first blush. Jowdry didn't notice Macaulay's body hidden in the dark near the rail fence. Next door to her, Jowdry didn't know, next door at her 123 Orchard Beach lay bodies of Greg and Jamie Blair. Jowdry didn't see either of them because he didn't go up their driveway. Well, there was no police around, no flashing light. I drove a couple of kilometers, didn't see anything, one armored vehicle. Jowdry said. At 6:30 in the morning, the night shift officers at the scene, wherever they were and whatever they had been doing, went home. This was first reported by the Globe and Mail. That's that article. Hopefully somebody linked that. The investigation, that's the excellent one with, if you put in Dave Lilly, Globe and Mail, more than likely that's the article you're looking for. It's a very good article. My hat's off to Dave Lilly and Officer Sergeant Halliday, I believe it is. The investigation into the murders of Orchard Beach Road hadn't yet even begun. Around the same time, Workman's girlfriend materialized out of nowhere and knocked on Chowdhury's door. She had told him that she'd been hiding in the woods all night. He was a woodsman. He knew the area. He didn't believe her. Mounties came for her. They didn't bother much with him or even search his house. They carted her away. Quote, how did they know that the house wasn't holding, how did he know he wasn't in the house holding someone hostage? Chowdhury asked. Quote, there's nothing they did was thorough or professional. A leg was sticking out. Bookkeeper Judy Myers had gone to bed late, as is her habit. When she said she heard what she thought to be gunshots more than two at precisely 11:28, because the evening CTV news was almost over. She was getting ready to watch The Honeymooners. Gosh, that's a show, isn't it? They still play that? Her recollection doesn't fit the timeline, but she's not the only one in the reference that time period. The three Griffins in their statement to the police talk about the events happening around that time as well. But police say that Workman left the area at that time. Meyer said that she woke around 4 a.m. hearing feral cats fighting in her yard. She went outside, didn't hear or smell anything. It was peaceful. She woke in the morning. She was shocked to find out on Facebook, what had taken place around her. It's a good warning, knocking door-to-door stuff. She's not the only one. Around 9 a.m., she said the RCMP ERT vehicle turned around in her driveway, and 15 minutes later, one stopped in her driveway. One of the tactical officers came to her door. They asked her if she was safe and whether she... One moment, please. Just one moment, okay? I'll be out in the car.